Hey, how's everybody doing? My name is Christian Wagner, and I'm the Militant Thomist. Gosh, I can never get this lighting right. This is terrible. Apologies on that. So I promise I'm here. Best thumbnail I've ever seen on a YouTube video. Well, then you should like, share, subscribe, and all that stuff, and force everybody else to do it too. Yes, I'm. Does it show you as a patron? No, I don't know why. That was kind of annoying. Okay, so before we get into it, oh man, I'm gonna forget everything I'm supposed to tell you guys. I should write notes about this eventually. Remember, you all need to know Greek. So to go to fluentgreeknt.com and use the code militant for 20% off. Also, if you like that music in the intro, there are the music links below. Remember to become a patron, to subscribe, to do all that stuff, and to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and to join the Discord. And also podcast wherever you want to go podcast, and then bookstore and Militant Thomist mug, also links below. And you'll see right at the top of this video, there are 2 additional links that I usually post. And these are very important for the topic at hand because everybody has been asking me recently about what you should do about certainty, because I have been a big proponent of certainty when it comes to philosophy, as the Catholic tradition always has. Well, this first link, I think it's the first link. No, it's the second link. Well, it's called The First Principles of Knowledge. It's by Father John Rickaby. He was a late 19th century Jesuit, back when the Jesuits were very, very based. So it's a wonderful book. Goes against a lot, basically every single author that's against the Catholic principles of certainty. Make sure you use that link because there's a different book, same title, same author, but it's like a very bad scanned version. My version is very based, and as you can see, it's actually typeset, so it is not garbage. So that's the first one if you wanted a really deep dive into this topic. And then the second one is more introductory. And this is actually one that I have shown before. If you really just want an easy sort of introduction, I'm going to be following the general outline that he provides here with other stuff that I know. So that's Father Charles Copens in his A Brief Textbook of Logic. I know, cover sucks. Yeah, my cover making skills are terrible. The other one actually didn't look too bad. This cover isn't the best. Very sorry about that, but it is what it is. So, brief textbook on logic. That about half the book is actually on certainty. The other half is a good introduction to the basic principles of logic. So there you go for that one. And then Copens actually has other books that I've published, but if you want to see all of the rest of them, you can go to christianwagner.com/shop. Boom. The Militant Thomist store where you can get the mug and all the other books that I reprint. Except I've not posted First Principles of Knowledge on there yet. Okay. Now that we have gotten all of that out of the way, I did make a slideshow. So I wanted something, visual makes it a lot easier. Add from Google Slides, yes. Man, I'm boomer teching right now. There you go. Certainty 1. Oh, it's processing. Sorry. There you go. Add to stream. Boom. The Nature of Certainty, and this is adapted from Copens' Brief Textbook of Logic, Book 2, Chapter 1. So if you wanted to go back and read in a bit more detail, it's right there. Oh, there you go. Is certainty like a transcendental? Oh, sorry, I forgot to answer your question. No, it is not, because transcendental, basically, so I guess you could say, in the aspect, so certainty has both an objective and a subjective element. The subjective element is the subject who has certainty. The objective element is that object in which we have certainty. So technically, in its in certainty's objective element, that is our intellect in relation to a certain object, you can say that that our intellect's relation to the object. So the object can give off certainty. If you want to speak of it in that sense, if you're referring to the subjective element, then it would be transcendental, because the intellect can know all things. So yes, in that sense, since everything, insofar as it has being, has truth, and truth is that certain relation to the intellect. So yes, that in that way, certainty can be spoken of as a transcendental, but that would be like a very improper way of speaking about it. Because certainty, usually we're referring more so to the subjective element, which is the removal of our possibility of error and assent for due reasons and stuff like that. But that is a good question. So thank you. So first, I'm actually going to get myself out. I'm just going to get myself completely out of the way, so you won't even be able to see me at all. So first, what is certainty? So as defined, it is the state of mind in which we firmly adhere to a truth on account of motives that exclude all fear of error. So, in this first, I guess you could say, episode of this series, I'm going to go over three things. So, first, what is truth? Because that's going to be very important with how the Catholic philosophical tradition has defined truth. So, second, we're going to talk about firm adherence. So, we're going to be thinking about the mind's relation to truth, because when it comes to certainty, we're specifically referring to the mind's relation to a certain object. And then third, we're going to be looking at those subjective elements or levels of certainty, and thinking about the motives that exclude all fear of error. So we're going to be just really going over this definition in general in all of its various parts. We're not really going to get into much of the super debated stuff for this episode. So first, we must go into what is truth. So, defined classically, truth is the conformity between a mind and a certain object. So, something, if you remember way back, I did a video on the transcendentals. So, when we talked about truth back then, metaphysical truth, which is the second thing under truth's general definition, when we're thinking about that, something has being, that is that certain actualization of existence in the real world. When something has being as related to the intellect, that is what we speak of as true. Being is related to the appetites as goodness. So in that second point, metaphysical truth is going to be that object which the intellect can conform to, and something is going to be true insofar as it has being. But the first point is really what we're talking about is going to be logical truth. That is the knowledge of a mind as conformable. Thus, we can speak of true judgments or a true understanding of a fact or of a theory. So we're mostly going to be talking about, when we speak about truth, of the subject who knows truth or who judges truly, because this is all going to be about judgments of truth. And then lastly, we can speak also of moral truth. So moral truth is going to be the account with which with the I promise I can speak today, which the subject gives. So in the mind, it's going to be called logical truth. In reality, it's going to be called metaphysical truth, and then the mind expressing is going to be called moral truth. If you want to give it a very pithy way. So what we're going to be studying here is going to be logical truth. So if we go back to our definition, the state of the mind in which we firmly adhere to a truth. So the firm adherence to truth is going to be logical truth, or the knowledge of the mind. or actually, I guess sorry, sorry if that's confusing. The conforming of the mind to the truth outside of the mind. So I guess truth right here is actually referring to metaphysical truth. But so we continue. So what is falsity? Because falsity is going to be a huge issue with people, which people trip up on. So falsity in its most basic sense is the opposite of truth. So it's important to note this is not the mere privation of truth. So let's say I don't know how many stars there are. That's the example which is classically given. I do not know how many stars there are in the whole universe. That is not falsity, because in order for falsity to occur, there must be the opposite of truth. Whereas me not knowing how many stars there are in the universe, that would be the mere privation of truth. So that is not falsity. So in order for it to be falsity, if I said, let's say there's 5 stars in the universe, that would be falsity. And notice that's in consideration of logical truth. So this occurs when there is something in the intellect which does not conform to the object known. So that'd be logical falsity. So if my intellect assented to the fact that there was 5 stars in the entire universe, that would be logical falsity. Or when there's something in speech which doesn't account for what is in the intellect. So if I said and told you and started teaching, if I made an entire YouTube series on the fact that there are 5 stars in the universe, the YouTube series itself would be moral falsity. So think, for example, the other Paul. So the other Paul might be watching. All of the other Paul's videos and tweets against Catholicism, that is moral falsity, because that is the opposite of the truth, since Catholicism is the religion which was preached by Christ, and therefore, because it has the mark of divinity, it is something which is absolutely certainly properly true. So all of the other Paul's tweets against Catholicism contain moral falsity, because it is the expression of what is contained in his intellect, which is a non-conformity to logical truth. So the other Paul, if you're watching, thank you for being my example. And there's no such thing as metaphysical falsity, because remember, metaphysical falsity, something is true insofar as it has being, as we all agreed upon. So in order for something to be false, it would have to be the opposite of being. The opposite of being is non-being. And so non-being is just really another non-being doesn't exist. So since non-being doesn't exist, there's no such thing as metaphysical falsity, because you would have to say, if there was a such thing as metaphysical falsity, that something which was non-existent existed. So that would be a contradiction. Therefore, there's no metaphysical falsity. Yeah. So how does logical falsity occur? So first, the intellect affirms something which is not in the object. So, for example, if I affirm that there is a 5th book of the Summa Contra Gentiles, that would be a logical falsity, because I'm affirming something which is not in the object. So second, the intellect affirms something as real, which is merely apparent. So an example of this would be to affirm that St. Thomas was the formal author of the Supplementum. So the Supplementum, Thomas is actually only the material author. He was not the formal author of the Supplementum. So I'm affirming something as real where it's merely apparent, because Thomas was the material author. I'm assuming that he's the formal author. And then the third, I can deny something which is in the object. So, for example, I could deny that St. Thomas covers the question of the equality of men and women in the Summa, where St. Thomas does treat this question of the equality of men and women in the Summa. Sorry, I just realized that you can't see me. I just took a sip of my sparkling water. So that would be kind of weird, since you can't see me taking a sip. Okay. So now apprehension, judgment, and truth, because from this we have a conclusion. You may not realize it, But from the way in which we've spoken of falsity, henceforth, we can actually come to a conclusion about truth and its relation to our intellect. So falsity concerns the conformity of the intellect to an object, as we agreed upon, concerns the nonconformity of the intellect to an object. Therefore, it is in the realm of judgment, not apprehension. So this is going to be our first thesis, and this is going to become very important later when we consider certainty in more detail. So our first thesis is that a mere apprehension as such cannot be false. And as defined, simple apprehension is the act of perceiving an object intellectually without affirming or denying anything concerning it. So right now, I want you guys to think of a triangle. So that image which just popped into your mind, that perception of a triangle which exists in your mind, that is a simple apprehension. So these simple apprehensions of certain objects, they cannot be false because, as we said before, when it comes to falsity, that is in the realm of judgment. That is, we are judging something as true, which is actually not true. So the proof of this is, this is from Copen's quote, a mere apprehension as such is merely a mental image of something, but every image, in as far as it is an image, is necessarily conformable to that of which it is the image, else it would not be the image of it. And there is an objection that comes up at this point. There are many false ideas, such as when we image God to be an old man sitting in the clouds. And the response to this is that the apprehension of an old man sitting in the clouds is a true apprehension, for it is an image of an old man sitting in the clouds. But when we make the judgment, this is God, it becomes false. But when we add that judgment, we have moved past a simple apprehension. So anytime that you're going to have a falsity which exists in your intellect, it is going to be a false judgment. It's not going to be the mere apprehension of the thing, which this may seem very trivial right now that I'm making this distinction, but it is going to become very important. This is going to become very important later. So now we're going to get into what are the states of relation of the mind to truth, because we've thought about the relation of truth and falsity, but now we're going to have to think about what exactly how exactly the mind can and cannot make a judgment. So first, our mind could be ignorant, and this is when the truth is not present at all. And this can come in two types: vincible ignorance, when we can remove it. For example, who was the first president of Canada? I have right now I'm going to come back. I have no idea who the first president of Canada is. This is something which I'm vincibly ignorant of, but I'm going to Google it right now. First president of Canada. It is Sir John Alexander MacDonald. So there you go. That was live example of vincible ignorance, because I just removed my ignorance right there. Second, something can be invincible ignorance. For example, how many stars are in the sky? I cannot just Google how many stars are in the sky. That is something which I and everybody watching is invincibly ignorant right now of. I guess you technically get a supernatural revelation of how many stars there are in the sky, but yeah. Doubt. Well, the one thing I do know when it concerns the stars of the sky, it is that it is more than the children of the Catholic Church, because Abraham has, well, I guess, yeah, I guess it. No. Sorry, I just schizo-moded right there. Okay, second, doubt. And the state of doubt is a hesitancy whether to assent. So when you are doubtful of something, there's an object which is actually present in front of you. So ignorance, the object is not present at all. The object, stars in the sky, all of the stars in the sky are not present to me to be able to count. But let's say I wanted to guess how many pages are in this book that I have in my hand, which you cannot see. I guess I'll This book right here, let's say the truth in front of me is the pages in this book. Now, or the amount of words in this book, I guess. I could just go and count up all of the words in this book. That is entirely possible. But I am not going to do that. So if somebody told me that there were, I don't know, 100,000 words in this book, I would be hesitant whether to assent or not. Um, I could count up all the words in the book, but I am just going to remain hesitant. Now, this can come in two types. It could be positive doubt, which means that I have reasons for or against the amount of words in that book. So let's say the publisher decided to email me right now during the middle of the stream and to tell me how many words there are in the book. Now, let's say I got another email, which was an anonymous source telling me that the publisher is actually lying and trying to cover up the amount of word count because they overcharge the printer. That is entirely possible. I now have reasons for and I have reasons against. So if I got those emails, I would have a positive doubt about how many words are in that book right now. Now, currently, actually, in real life, I do have a negative doubt. I have no reason either way, whether I really have no reason. Um, um, Either way, I've negative doubt right now. Now, third, I could have suspicion. So let's say a news article came out later, or let's say somebody tweeted later and said that, I don't know, the other Paul decided to become Roman Catholic. Somebody tweeted that later. I would have suspicion against that. I would have suspicion against that that truth. I would have suspicion towards the truth that the other Paul is still a Protestant because of the fact that I am a Roman Catholic friend of the other Paul. So the other Paul would probably text me or something and ask me questions if he was wondering about this, or he would at least let me know before he tweeted it out. So I would have a suspicion that it's just a joke, but I would not. I would really not fully assent to either side. So I have a reason to be suspicious. Now, fourth, I could have an opinion. Let's say I don't know. I have the other Paul. I guess he tweets out that he is converting to Roman Catholicism. At first, I'm suspicious that it's just a joke, but a mutual friend of the other Pauls and I messages me and says that it's legit. So I have somebody who is telling me, and I have the tweet saying it's not a joke. So let's say I form the opinion, and the other Paul also deletes all of his anti-Roman Catholic content on his YouTube page. So now I am of the opinion that the other Paul is actually converting to the one Holy Roman Catholic Church. That is now my opinion, but I still fear that I'm erring. So I assent to one side with fear of error. Now this can come in two types. Let's say first there's intrinsic probability. So first, I am considering whether the other Paul would convert or not, and I think, well, he has been thinking a lot recently about Roman Catholicism. Maybe, perhaps, in consideration of the act of conversion and the fact that it's an illumination of the Holy Spirit, perhaps he is going to convert. So I have a certain intrinsic probability because I've considered the thing itself, and now I'm going to assent to it. Now, in the second case, I get a text from a friend, that mutual friend that I was talking about. When it comes to the text from the friend, that is extrinsic probability. It is a certain authority who is speaking on the matter to me because a mutual friend would be an authority on the current state of the other Paul's mind in relation to converting to Roman Catholicism. So I have intrinsic probability for my opinion if I have authority, or intrinsic probability for my opinion if it's a consideration of the likelihood of the thing itself. So intrinsically, considering that whole situation of, let's say, the other Paul sends a tweet out that he's converting. Intrinsically, I would probably have the opinion that he is not actually converting and it's just a joke. But I would fear error because I do not have the degree of certainty about that. But extrinsically, when it comes to the random text that I got from a mutual friend from that authority, extrinsically, I would assent to the opposite side. But really, if I had both sources, I probably would just, I honestly have doubt. I would have positive doubt because I'd have reasons for it and against it. But let's say I was feeling hasty and wanted to give an opinion on it. So, lastly, we can have certainty. So, certainty is the assent of the mind to something without fear of error. Now, certainty can come in two types. We're gonna break up a lot of different categories of proper certainty later, but for now, you can have first proper certainty, which is fear of error is excluded by motives which leave no room for reasonable doubt. So you have excluded all reasonable doubts. So think of it as like a murder trial. So you have a murder trial and you have all of the evidence put. The dude's fingerprints are on the murder weapon and he has no alibi and there's like a video of him and he tweeted out earlier that day that he wanted to murder this person. I have excluded my fear of error and the court has excluded their fear of error by motives who are leaving no room for reasonable doubt now. Because it wouldn't be reasonable for me to see all of that evidence, which are all of those great motives, and then just say, it's just a possibility that she was struck by lightning and that happened to so like jostle around her house that it created his fingerprint on there because there's a 1 in 10 quadrillion chance of his fingerprint being created on there and it just happens that this and that happened. No, that's actually really stupid. Those aren't reasonable doubts. That's the issue with Cartesian skepticism, because all that Descartes bringing forth, it is not reasonable. There are reasons which I will not go over now because we'll cover them later. There are motives which cause me to exclude the possibility of my mind being controlled by an evil demon. There are motives, so it's not reasonable to it is not reasonable to have that doubt of my mind's certainty about a certain truth. It's not reasonable to have it. To think that there's a demon controlling my mind. Although there definitely was a demon who controlled Descartes' mind. That is quite certain. I have a proper certainty for that. So now, second, you can have improper certainty. And this is usually where people get into trouble. Because improper certainty is fear of error is excluded by the free action of the will, which turns away the intellect from considering all reasons of doubt. So let's say the other Paul's tweet came out that he said, I'm going to become a Roman Catholic and get received at the Easter Vigil. I'm going to take a sip of my sparkling water. So you have that situation that I brought up earlier where I gave an opinion. And let's say I spend some time considering all of the intrinsic probability and extrinsic probability, and I consider all the motives and reasons for all of it. I just spend a bunch of time considering it. I write disputations back and forth considering whether this tweet is a joke. And then finally, I just decide just throw it all away. And I'm going to assent to the fact that I am certain that the other Paul is not converting. I just decide to remove it by one action of my will and just not consider any of it. I'm just going to put my fingers in my ear, say la la la, and decide, okay, that is going to be my my choice. That's going to be my certainty. Now, because I haven't had certain motives which remove any reasonable doubt, I have improper certainty in that moment because I just excluded all fear of error, not by a deductive process of excluding reasonable doubt, but rather I have excluded my fear of error just by an action of the will, just by ignoring all of it. And I'm sure we can think of many people, many people who have improper certainty about things. Let's say somebody says that they are certain that, let me think of a stupid opinion. They are certain that, okay, let me think of an opinion that won't get me canceled. That they are certain that God doesn't exist. Let's just do that one. That's a good one. So this person, they start reading up on it because technically, when it comes to the existence of God, since it's from creation, it can be known by the mode of reason. So I'm not mixing up faith and reason here. I'm just talking about strictly the existence of God, not any of the mysteries or truths of faith. So the existence of God, they pick up, I don't know, maybe they pick up the Summa Contra Gentiles or something. Probably not. They okay. Let's be perfectly honest. They're watching YouTube videos from a bunch of sodomites who literally look like the guy from the Soy Jack meme. Like that. That's who they're watching videos from. And these guys are doing a bunch of debunking of the existence of God, and they're making a bunch of stupid arguments that we've already responded to, like literally 2,000 years ago. Actually, even before the Christian faith, we've been debunking these arguments. It's not anything new. So they start watching all of these videos, and then they're watching, and then they run into, let's say, a based in Chad Thomist. And the based in Chad Thomist gives all of these, let's say it's Mathema, gives them all these wonderful arguments for the existence of God. And they're like, okay, dang, I am now at the level of opinion. I have the opinion, I have the fear of error that God doesn't exist from some intrinsic probability. And then they're thinking, and then they hate God so much. Well, let's not even go there. Let's say they have so little concern for the truth that they're like, okay, I really dislike the Christian faith, the Catholic faith. So what they decide to do is they just completely ignore all of the arguments from the Chad Thomas. They don't answer all of them, any of them actually. And they just throw away all of the arguments that they've been given for the other side, and they decide to assent to the fact and say that they have some sort of improper certainty, no fear of error. Absolutely, they have no fear of error, and they say that God doesn't exist. And it's not by consideration of motives and of arguments, but it's just they decide to just toss it aside by their own will. So when it comes to falsity, falsity is only present in the last two: opinion and certainty. Because notice, you can either be ignorant, where the truth isn't present. You can have doubt. You can have suspicion. None of those are in assent. So none of those contain falsity. You may lean to the wrong side. You may have hesitancy concerning an important truth, but none of those are assent. None of those are assent at all. So falsity can only be present when you have an assent, which is opinion and certainty. So notice the removal of the will was the chief source of falsity, as I said. But there are certain proximate sources. So first, you may have prejudice, that is, judgments formerly assented to without proper examination. So you may have somebody who, let's go back to our existence of God example. They just don't consider the arguments. They just don't spend the time that they should considering both sides of the arguments for the existence of God. That person would have prejudice, properly speaking, prejudice. None of this gay stuff that people talk about now. Second, false information. So let's say somebody, their high school teacher in school told them that God didn't exist because Christian God mean man, Bible made up, and all that garbage. That would be false information. which would lead to a false assent of the will. Third, dullness. The person might just be dumb. That is entirely possible. They try to consider the information, and they're dense. That happens to me a lot with certain opinion, with certain debates. My mind is just too dull to figure it out. I honestly just don't know. I'm sure everybody has those times when they don't have big enough brain to consider this. Dullness, that might be a source of falsity. Inattention. Let's say they're just kind of in la la land, and that's why they just uh, randomly assent to a certain side, and they just don't really care, and they just remove all fear of doubt because they just don't care. That would be another source of falsity. Passion. Let's say they're just really angry at they're just really angry at their mom or their parents. You have that teenage rebellion. So they remove all of their fears of error, or they might have the opinion that God doesn't exist because I hate my mom and dad, and my mom and dad think that God exists. There's another example. Impatience. So either because we are eager to act, or too conceited to doubt our judgment, or too vain to acknowledge our ignorance. From all this, it is evident that virtue is favorable in the acquisition of sound knowledge. So let's say they're full of themselves, or they just don't want to go that hard laborious process of knowing. So they just decide to remove all doubt and assent with certainty, or they may even they might assent to the opinion of something, and they're just impatient. They just go ahead of it and don't really consider everything. So that is another source of falsity. Or lastly, it could be mental illness. Let's say you have a schizophrenic who is judging that um, I don't know, there are bugs under his skin. That would be a certain source of falsity because I'm assuming there are not bugs under his skin. So elements of certainty. So remember we talked about those two elements of certainty. So first is that subjective element. So concerning the subject who is certain. And remember we have two parts of this. First is firm adhesion. So that's called the positive element. So you firmly adhere. I think it would be adhere. Is that even a word? I have no idea. You firmly assent, let's say, or adhere to the objective element, which is going to be truth. And then the second is the negative element, is you're going to exclude the fear of doubt. So second is the objective element, so concerning the object, which the subject has certainty about. So this is a quote from Copens. Such a manifestation of a truth as is sufficient to exclude all fear of error. The subjective adhesion is caused by the objective manifestation. So with Kyle Marx and his question about whether certainty is a transcendental, the objective element of certainty, that is the sufficient manifestation of a truth to exclude all fear of error. So the objective element of I don't know, my knowledge of the number of pages and my certainty about the number of words in my book example that I went earlier. The objective element is going to be the manifestation of truth, which is found in the words of the book and my ability to count them. That is going to be that objective element is there's that truth manifests itself just by the nature of words and numbers. So that is the objective element of certainty. And when it comes to that subjective adhesion and the exclusion of error, well, I guess just the subjective adhesion, just the positive element of the subjective element of certainty, that would be caused by the objective element, that manifestation that the object gives. So there are various different types of certainty. We're almost done. Yes. So just this is there's a bunch of different categories of certainty. So this is really going to set the foundation for the next, I think, 3 videos is what I'm going to be doing with certainty. So first we can think of reflex certainty. So that is certainty, which reflects on the fact that it has certainty. So I guess reflex certainty, you can consider it as certainty about certainty, or reflects on the fact that we have certainty. So you can also have direct certainty, which is just certainty that you're not really reflecting on the fact that you have certainty. An example of this, which is about to turn into reflex certainty, is that you are probably certain about death. Now, you probably don't consider and reflect on the fact that you're certain about death, but you are, at least before I told you, you were directly certain of death, but you didn't really consider it right now. So there you go. And then philosophical certainty is really just a species of reflex certainty. So philosophical certainty is certainty, but it notices distinctly and scientifically the motives of adhesion to a truth. So philosophical certainty considers those motives for adhering to the truth. And now you also have metaphysical certainty, which is when the mind sees that a proposition is essentially true because its contradictory would be absurd. So an example of this would be do good and avoid evil. You're metaphysically certain of that because your motive. So these are different. The reason these are divided, these last three, are because they have different motives for adhesion. So with metaphysical certainty, you see the proposition is essentially true because the impossible what the presuppositionalist would call the impossibility of the contrary. Second is physical certainty. So this is according to the laws of nature. So you may say you are physically certain of the fact that the dead do not rise again. You are physically certain about that. Then third, you may also be morally certain of something. And this is when the mind sees something that is constantly and universally true in the conduct of men. So, for the first, your motive of certainty is the impossibility of the contrary. The second, your motive of certainty is the laws of nature. And the third, your motive of certainty is the consent of all men, or what kind of universally happens. That is, an example of this would be that good men do not lie. The fact that good men do not lie, that is something you are morally certain of. But moral certainty can also be spoken of in a different aspect. I'm sure anybody who follows apologetics has heard a lot of people talk about moral certainty this and moral certainty that. But that is actually a proper use of the term, is you can be morally certain. Basically, you have a strong probability of something. So I have not removed reasonable doubt because I can't be reasonably certain really that my house is not on fire because my wife is cooking dinner right now. So it actually would be it would not be beyond a reasonable doubt when it comes to the fact that my kitchen is currently on fire. But I have a moral certainty. I have a strong probability that my kitchen isn't currently on fire. But I do have a real certainty that my room is not on fire right now because I can look around and look at it. Bro, Cartesians be like, it's unwise to be certain about something. I'm certain about this. Cartesians are like, you can't have absolute certainty. Yes, I'm absolutely certain about this. Trolled. Yeah, I guess this would that would the fact that you can have certainty would fall under I don't know whether it'd be metaphysical or moral. Because like there can be truths like do good and avoid evil that are metaphysically certain. So it's not necessarily like the fact that a triangle, because you can be metaphysically certain about the fact that a triangle does not have four sides, or the fact that one is not two, or the fact that like 1 + 1 = 2, or something like that. So metaphysical certainty, do good and avoid evil. So maybe the fact of absolute certainty would be, or it could be morally certain because, yeah, but it's not really I guess you can know it from the conduct of men, but not properly. I don't know which category that would fall under. What? Hmm, interesting. But okay, so there he had a really good conclusion. So I'm just going to read this conclusion and then wrap it up. So I just copied his whole conclusion to this discussion. So he says, subjectively considered, all kinds of certainty are alike in the negative element. That is, all exclude fear of error. But the positive element, that is, the intensity of the mind's adhesion to truth, may be more or less firm. So, by definition, to be certain of something is to remove reasonable doubt. So, when it comes to the negative element, all kinds of certainty are on a level playing field. But when it comes to the adhesion, that is the positive element, so the fact that we have adhered to something, our certainty can differ. So, in some cases, as in axioms, and generally in all that is immediately evident, the mind cannot doubt the agreement of subject and predicate. Thus, we cannot help seeing that a whole is greater than its parts, that some bodies exist, that virtue and vice differ from one another, etc. Even in many things that are only immediately evident, we cannot entertain a doubt. For example, no well informed man can doubt that ancient Rome existed. In many matters, however, we can refuse to admit the objective truth. And in others, we can find it difficult to steady our attention sufficiently on the object to exclude all doubt. Metaphysical certainty, admitting no possible exception, is, as such, nobler than other kinds. Still, it is not always stronger in a given case. Thus, I am more intensely convinced of Caesar's death, which is a matter of moral certainty, than of many theses in mathematics or philosophy, which rest on metaphysical principles. Okay, so that is all I have for you today. Remember to subscribe, to buy those books if you want to know more about certainty, and to become a patron if you really if you actually, I forgot to mention this earlier, but if you become a patron, you do get a PDF of those books from me. So thank you, and I will talk to you guys later. Remember, is it still Ascension Tide? Yes, until this Sunday. I think this Sunday is Pentecost. So our Lord has ascended. Alleluia, alleluia.